Today we're here at Ultimate Motorsports, and we're going to cover the system of the power steering and the jacking. And we have made up a diagram to try to make it really easy to understand and eliminate some of the confusion there is out there in regards to the power steering system and the jacking system. So let's go inside and take a look. So here is the entire jacking and power steering system laid out, and this is how it works. I'll start out with the fluid reservoir. The fluid reservoir, if you're using it in a system where you like to be able to extend one jack, you need to add 1.83 quarts above the capacity that you started out with. If you want to be able to activate left and right side jack at the same time, such as situations getting the car on stock or working on it, you need to add double the 1.83 capacity, which is 3.66 quarts of fluid. Now, as far as the fluid, you can use the fluid that your power steering manufacturer recommends. The jacking system will work fine with that. The fluid comes into the reservoir, out of the supply line, and it is in our experience very important that the outlet fitting on the reservoir is located higher than the inlet fitting on the pump. So in an ideal situation, the shortest possible line length and an elevation drop from this fitting to the inlet on the pump. This will allow that the system is being filled and avoid cavitation issues on the inlet side of the power steering pump. Now, moving on to the power steering pump, whether you use the larger GM style or the smaller GM style, steel body, aluminum body, the principles are all the same. Fluid comes in from the reservoir. Inside the pump, you have a pressure relief valve. In this particular pump, the pressure relief valve is in here. It is set by the manufacturer of the power steering pump, usually to 1,600 psi or 1,650 psi. But for this demonstration, let's just say 1,600. So when the motor is turning the pump, pressure from the pump is coming out of the system. Now, some cars already have, without having the jacking system, a pressure relief valve. We highly recommend that you have a pressure relief valve in the system. What the pressure relief valve does is, as the fluid passes through and over to the steering valve, if there is a surge in the system, or if the driver is to turn the system lock to lock for an extended period of time, it is not only relying on the pressure relief valve inside of the pump to be sitting bypassing at the 1,600 psi and really super fast heating up the fluid inside of the pump, which is a very small volume. Now, if you have the pressure relief valve in the system, the fluid will come into here. This pressure relief valve right here will then be set at 50 psi or lower rating than this. So let's say 1,600 psi. This one will be set at 1,550. Now this will open before this relief valve and take this fluid coming in, out of the pressure relief valve return side and back into the reservoir. When returning the fluid from the pressure relief valve and into the reservoir, we recommend that you do it on a separate fitting into the tank. Do not take the pressure relief valve and return it into the supply side. Any kind of air, cavitation, or anything like that that is generated by the pump and or jacking system, which we'll cover in a minute, would get sent right back into the inlet line and aggravate the cavitation even more. So let me explain how to properly adjust the pressure relief valve. We have a gauge here. This is a regular 2,000 psi pressure gauge. You can buy it from Ultimate Motorsport, or you can use your own if you have one in the shop. It has a number 4 AN port fitting on the bottom. You take the cap off the pressure relief valve and you connect the pressure gauge to the relief valve. Now, with the engine running and the engine above 2,000 RPM, it's very important that you're not trying to adjust the relief pressure if the pump is not at full pumping capacity. So on most cars, depending on the pulley ratio, it can vary, but on most cars there'll be 2,000 RPM and higher. So sit in the car, elevate the RPM, and turn the pressure relief valve setting in. And what it'll do is when you do that, and for instance, if you have a jacking system, just simply shut off the valve right here, which blocks the flow, and now you're reading the pressure output of the pump. If you don't have a jacking system, that is fine. You can turn the steering valve all the way lock to lock, left or right side, and you'll see the pressure spike up to whatever the pressure relief valve in the power steering pump is set at. For this demonstration, we're going to say 1,600. I will warn you on this. They may say that it is 1,600, but in more cases than not, it can vary up and down easily 50 psi from pump to pump, even if they're made by the same company. So now that we know the output pressure of the pump, in this case 1,600 psi, we're going to turn the pressure relief valve outwards and continue to check once in a while with the valve or by turning the steering lock to lock what the output pressure is. We want it to be 50 psi lower than the output. So in this case, 15,500 psi. I highly recommend that if you do this, that you do it in the car. So you use the same gauge because this is very critical. So once this pressure has been set, 50 psi lower here, in this case, 1,550 psi, your system is set. Another really nice part about having a pressure port in the system and also a gauge with you at a race is should you have a problem with the power steering system during testing or whatnot, this is the fastest way to troubleshoot the system. If you have a system that doesn't build any pressure, changing out a control valve, changing out a steering rack, changing out any other component is certainly not going to help. This is a really fast way of troubleshooting the system. So that is setting the pressure relief valve. I'll continue on with the flow. From the pressure relief valve, it goes on to the jack control valve. The jack control valve has absolutely no restriction. It is a straight hole, straight through. So the fluid passes through into the inlet side of the steering valve. Depending on driver input, either turning left or right, it will direct the steering fluid to the ram, either left or right side, to assist with the steering. When the driver has this wheel in a neutral position, the fluid will return back to here and back into the power steering reservoir, completing the loop. Now, when you go to use a jacking system, what you do is you bring the vehicle to a stop, you select the side of jack that you want to extend. In this case, right for red. So we're going to turn the control valve over to the extend side, right for red. So this will be on the right hand side of the vehicle. Then turn on the power. This raises the pressure in the system and now is extending the right side jack. Now the fluid will pass out to the right side extend line, up and in on top of the piston, extending the jack all the way out. Here you can choose a 24-inch, a 30-inch, or a 33-inch of travel on the jack, and this will vary the length of the body depending on what type of car you have it on. Typically on a limited class they will use a 24-inch. This is a 30-inch. This is what we use in a class 1 car. We also offer a 33-inch. That's what we use in all the trophy trucks. So after the jack has reached full extension, and it takes about 7 seconds with a normal power steering pump in the car, you would turn the lever to the lock position. The pin will drop down and it will stay locked. At that point, you take the power off the system. Now the co-driver that has exited the vehicle will change the tire. Once he's done changing the tire and he gives you a signal that the tire is back, you simply move the lever to the retract position. When the jack is retracting, the fluid from inside the jack will return through the jack retract line and pass back to the power steering reservoir through this line right here. Now, the return, we highly recommend that you turn it into the reservoir. Again, do not return the return line from the jacking system into the inlet line going to the power steering pump. This will increase your risk of cavitating the system and adding or introducing air into the supply line. Not a good idea, can cause a lot of problems. Return the fluid back into the reservoir at a high level. Turn the power back on. Takes about 5 to 7 seconds to retract the jack. The fluid required to retract it is less because you have the shaft diameter that you're minusing from the system. So after the 5 seconds, you will see the indicator light on the dash that is triggered by this mechanical switch, which is just a simple on-off switch. You can do it with a grounded circuit. You can do it with a power circuit. It really doesn't matter. It's super simple. It doesn't have to be working for the jacking system to be working, but it is nice for the driver to have the LED on the dash to know when the jack is fully up. Once the light goes out, simply turn the power off. Now you're back to driving the car as normal. Now, a couple of things in regards to the jacking control valve. It is 100% mechanical. It weighs 4 pounds, 9 ounces, so it's very light. It has a pilot operated check valve in it, so that at all times when you're driving down the race course with the car, the jack is being held in the up position with hydraulic pressure. We've been data logging that on our car, and usually because of the back pressure created by the control valve coming out of here, it sees pulses upwards of 1,000 psi all the time. We've never seen a pressure less than 1,000 psi in a car that has been driven. If it sits for days, yes, the pressure can go down. However, it will not affect it because the jacking system also has a mechanical detent in it that keeps the shaft from coming down. That pretty much covers the operation of the jacking and power steering system. In regards to the foot of a jacking system, which you see right here, we have a couple of different designs. The one that we have installed on our truck is an 8-inch pad in the regular design. So this is a pad that is flat on the bottom. This will, on a truck that weighs, let's say 5,000 pounds, easily lift it in sand, dirt, and all kinds of different, even very loose terrain without sinking into the ground. So this is our 8-inch Baja pad. We have a 12-inch Dakar pad, which is exactly the same thing, but larger diameter for obviously increased lifting capacity in super soft sand, like you would experience in Dakar, which is why we call it a Dakar pad. However, during our development, we have come up with a newer style pad, which is also 8 inches, like this one right here, but it has an increased lifting capacity, especially in super soft grounds, because of this cup design on the bottom. So what happens is, as the foot comes down, contacts the ground, it will compact the dirt into here and sink down very little. We've done testing on military applications where the trucks weigh up to 15,000 pounds, and it has proven to be very, very effective. In the design of these two different pads right here, the installed height is the same. The foot extension has been compensated to make up for the dish, so you can take, if you have this style on the truck now, this is a straight bolt-on without any modification of the jack installed height or anything like that. Now, for all of our designs, they have a foot built in with a spring tension. So as the pad elevates up and hits the floor of the truck, it has a built-in spring, so it pulls the pad up against the floorboard with 60 pounds of pressure. So this ensures that the pad stays flush up against the floor and it doesn't allow any dirt or anything like that to come in. And of course it misaligns and comes back up and it finds its own home every time.